Hi, and welcome to today's show, where I'll be sharing some developments with regards to end of life plans in terms of how our bodies could be treated once we are deceased. Now, the information here may appeal to those of you who live maybe more consciously, want to live more sustainably, and in an eco friendly way. Before I dive into any of that, welcome back if you're one of my regulars. Great to see you here. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Bybreen and I help baby boomers reinvent themselves psychologically, practically, and technically so they can thrive in their third act of life. So let me give you some context to all of this because 2019 was a really pivotal year. That was the year when we saw this explosion of the conversation around climate change led by fantastic Gen Xers. And then over here in the UK, there's a market research company called Ipsos Mori, and they conducted a research because of this climate change, but also looking at the relationship of death and dying. And so they surveyed about 1,000 people to get a sense of what are their thoughts and their feelings and their perspective around their choices around death and dying. Interestingly, they found that a third of the participants actually struggled with the idea of actually having the conversation about death and dying, even though each and every one of us is going to have to cross that threshold. However, two-thirds were very vocal about all of this because of their kind of climate change, eco-friendly credentials. They live in a far more sustainable way, and they could see the kind of connection and confluence between their burial choices and climate change. And so there were two-thirds who were very vocal around the choices that are available and those that are really causing harm to our environment. And then there's a company called Recompose, and they're based in Seattle in America. And they won the Gizmodo Science Fair Award because back in 2019, on the back of this climate change discussion and how we could live far more sustainably, there's the actual entrepreneur. In fact, she's an academic turned entrepreneur called Katrina Spade. And her thesis was around climate change. But actually, is there a humane, respectful way whereby the composting process that has been perfected with regards to livestock and their carcasses, is there a humane and respectful way that that process could be developed to contribute to another option with regards to how our bodies are catered for once we depart? So all of this, these three things were happening in 2019, and actually climate change was the catalyst for a lot of this. So obviously there's Katrina, she has this idea about creating something called human composting, otherwise known as natural organic reduction. And her company, Recompose, won this scientific fair award because of this recognition that here's a new option for those people who choose to integrate their values around sustainability, eco-friendly living into the decisions that they make with regards to how their bodies are going to be treated once they depart. So what is this process? It's very new and it's only been legitimized in a handful of states in America and then in Sweden, in Europe. So when Katrina had this idea, obviously it's not something that she could go off and her colleagues build this thing. Back in 2019, they actually worked with lawmakers and legislators with regards to the ethical considerations. Could this process in terms of human composting be legitimized? In 2019 in Washington, laws were passed, and so it's legal in Washington, as well as Seattle and Colorado. Now, in Colorado, what they said is this is great. Yes, it can happen. But actually, human composting, which essentially means that there's a vessel, a wooden vessel, and the deceased body is placed inside this vessel along with wood chips and shavings and straws and other organic materials. And over a 5 to 7 stroke 9 week process, this vessel is closed and the body decomposes. After several weeks, when the vessel is opened, the remnants are soil. And so what Colorado was saying, yes, families can actually use this process. We've got forests here, and so forests are to be enjoyed by everybody, including, the encouragement of biodiversity, as well as humans and families. However, the soil that is the outcome of this process cannot be used to plant food, which is understandable because there's this whole issue about food security. So it can only be used for biodiversity and plants. So 2019 was the launch of all of this, because we have the traditional way of burials, which is, it's a funeral. Body's placed in a coffin, which invariably is non-biodegradable. It goes into the earth. After a while, the body decomposes, and then it begins to contaminate the earth, which then leaks into ground water, which isn't an ideal solution. And then with regards to flame cremation, what happens there? Obviously, the body is burnt, but then there's this sense of, the toxic fumes that arise as a result of this. It uses fossil fuels and gas, and it emits millions of tons of carbon dioxide. And so therefore, that equally isn't a very good solution. So this third option regarding those of you who are really conscious about living sustainably and wanting to infuse your sustainable living choices post your death. Now, naturally, there are advocates, and rightfully there should be advocates. So you've got advocates from a cultural point of view, advocates from a religious point of view, and also those who may not be religious, but there's some backlash to this because there's a sense of human dignity. Is it a very dignified way to turn human bodies into compost? So people are really uncomfortable about that. But there's also this sense of, what about the emotional connection? For some people, when their beloveds have departed, they like to go somewhere. They want to go to, a cemetery to pay their respects. And so some advocates are saying, actually, there's an emotional disconnect, because if a human body is turned into compost, where do the loved ones go? Legitimate concerns. And then there's this emerging trend. One's really established and one is becoming more established. So the more established trend is there are millions and millions of older people around the world who are single, living alone, and may not have family members. And so this could be an option for those people if they have those sustainable credentials. But also there's a whole host of people who are more transient, becoming location independent, who equally may not have family members. And so the whole environment around the choices that are available to us obviously require, ethical considerations, research. It's not something that you can just rock up and think, yes, that's an option. You obviously have to check, research, what are the laws, what are the legalities, what are any kind of regulations and statutory instruments governing this new legal option. But is it legal in the area that you live in, or is it legal in the countries that you might be going to if you're location independent? Another benefit to this is that it's far more cost effective And it reduces greenhouse gases that, come from the traditional ways of burial. So that's this new option with regards to end of life care. It's a difficult conversation for one to have with themselves if you're that way inclined, but it could potentially be a difficult conversation for family members. But by introducing these developments, as you know on my channel, that's the whole thing about helping baby boomers in particular to thrive with new information that helps them make different choices or enhances the decisions that they make around their life. So I wanted to bring you this new development. So beyond the traditional burial, and we have this cremation, then we have this human composting. There's alternatives in terms of green funerals, natural burials. And so they've been in existence for quite some time. Here in the UK, since about 1993, and the first land that this could happen was actually introduced in Carlisle. And so, with a green burial, what happens here is that a body is placed in a biodegradable vessel, a coffin, that could be made from bamboo, for example, but the body is placed there and it's placed inside a quite shallow grave, and it doesn't have any kind of embalming fluids, and there isn't like a memorial or a tombstone that's placed uh, alongside the grave. So here again, it's this idea of how is biodiversity created, but also it's for people who, really do want to commune with nature, in nature, while they're here and when they depart. And for a lot of people, they don't actually like cemeteries. And so it's this option of communing with nature, being part of the elements, creating nutrients, but also this sense of for families who are not into this idea of going to a traditional cemetery, family discussions might have led to a decision that there's a special place that their dearly departed actually wants to be buried in. So that's the third option. And then there's this fourth option called a burial suit. This one I had never heard of. And the human composting I only heard of very recently. But this burial suit is made from biodegradable material. And so you can be buried in this suit. And one of the kind of outcomes of this is that once the decomposition has taken place, it actually encourages the growth of wild mushrooms. I know when I came across it, I thought that's very interesting. If you want to find out more, there's a TED talk that was released in 2011, and it's literally called My Burial Suit. So go and check that out. So these conversations that are beginning to emerge as we are seeing the impact of climate change, and who are we becoming, how are we adjusting, and how are we participating in the demise or the kind of protection of our planet, philosophical questions that each and every one of us may take the opportunity to explore. But as you're thinking about your end of life plan, which comprises of so many different elements, and I will be sharing aspects of those, in future episodes of this show. But it's about, do you want your values to be infused in all areas of your life? The more that we live consciously, and each and every person arrives at that in whatever time frame, there's no judgment. But if you're somebody who is really into sustainable living, eco-friendly, there's a consciousness about, well, what is happening to our planet and how can I make a contribution that's positive whilst I'm here? And if this new option, as I said, is only in a handful of states, California is on the way. I think they're looking to bring it legalize it within the next few years. So there's a bill that's going through at the moment. But incrementally, we're seeing this growth in this new choice around, human composting. So something for you to consider, something for you to ponder if it sits with you. because at the end of the day, the whole point is that you must make whatever decisions for your life that truly honor who you are while you are here and how you would like to be honored when you are departed from our beautiful planet Earth. So that's what I wanted to share with you, this new development around end of life planning, death planning, what choices exist, and yeah, how do you want to be remembered and how do you want to be honored? So that's what I wanted to share with you. I'd love to hear about some of your choices. Are you somebody who is aging alone, like I'm aging alone, for example? And there are millions and millions of us around the world. Are you somebody who's aging alone? Is this a conversation that you've started to have with yourself or you're taking tentative steps? I'd love to hear your views. Put them in the comment box below. I'd love to kind of engage with you around it. Or what decisions have you made? Are you a staunch, advocate against this? But I just wanted to bring these new developments. And if you have other baby boomers in your life, invite them along because as you know, I'm here every Sunday, 3:30, so that I can bring you insights and vignettes about new developments that can help you thrive. And please like and subscribe to my channel. Stay well, and I will see you again next week. Bye-bye.